there. You don't have to go say, when did I have to have that? Oh, I didn't see that. More people forget about the mortgage commitment date than any other item in the agreement of sale, and that can be a very big problem because the seller can terminate you. Okay? I can't tell if this is blue. All right? This paragraph you also do not have. Okay, well, first of all, here's a question. This is a question for the group. Anything in red here is something they're proposing, and they told me to ask you this. Would you like the appraisal contingency addendum? So this sale is not contingent on the appraised value of the property unless checked below. Appraisal contingency addendum is attached to this agreement. Would you like that in the agreement of sale, front and center prominent like this, or not? Tell me the pros, tell me the cons of having brought to the attention of everybody that you could have an appraisal contingency in the agreement of sale.
For a buyer, yes.
You like having it there?
Yep.
For a buyer, yes.
For a seller,
See?
buyer,
See?
yes. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
for a buyer, now you're a seller. Do you want it in there?
Yeah, I would want it. I would want to see that.
As a seller, you're
Well,
okay
I mean,
with it?
I want to know that, okay, I run the risk here of,
My
if it
property
doesn't
not-
appraise, this deal goes south on me. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong.
Where is it today?
It's not there, or else, tell me if it's, I can't remember, because if it's above the signature lines.
Yeah. it's like-
That's where we wanted to put it last time. I can't remember right now if it got in here or not. Yes. Okay? So it's above the signature line, under special clauses, appraisal contingency addendum. We made it a little simple there so people couldn't really see it. Now they're going to make it prominent and put it within the mortgage contingency. For you, page 10. Okay? But does it really, it's probably, here's what I can tell you, is probably going to happen. It's probably going to be in the agreement of sale in a different place than special clauses. But does it really belong in the mortgage contingency when there is no mortgage in 20% of the cases? Shouldn't be in the mortgage contingency. My recommendation is they move it up right under waived. You know, take this and move it up there under waived. The mortgage is waived, however, we do have an appraisal contingency. That would be seem to me, the place to put it. What do you think, Angela?
But Kathy, if someone is paying cash, are they necessarily getting the property appraised?
No, it's going to be an option, yes or no.
Okay.
So they'll have the option of getting it appraised. Not everybody cash, they're getting a great deal, it's a fixer-upper, and, you know, Mike, you're an investor, do you always want a property appraised if you're getting it for a really good price?
No.
No, you're good. I know it's going to be worth more than it is when I'm done with it, right?
Mhm.
So you don't always have to have it. So watch for where that's going to happen. So right now it's not there. Right now you also don't have this paragraph because they realize that loan-to-value LTVs are difficult to understand. So they're adding this paragraph. The loan-to-value ratio, called the LTV, is used by lenders as one tool to help assess the potential risk of a mortgage loan. A particular loan-to-value may be necessary to qualify for certain loans, or buyers might be required to pay additional fees if the loan-to-value exceeds a specific level. The appraised value of the property is used by lenders to determine the maximum amount of the mortgage loan. The appraised value is determined by an independent appraiser subject to the lender's underwriter review and may be higher or lower than the purchase price and or the market price of the property. So what they're trying to say here, Mr. Buyer, is that everything is tied to how much money you're putting down, how much money they're willing to lend based on the value of the appraised value, which can change all the way up until 3 days before settlement. We're going to put a protective percentage rate in here so that we have a little bit measure of protection even if you have an appraisal clause in here. They're not going to understand all this. Just always point to how it's going to help them and how you're helping them to reduce their risk. Are you with me? Don't get crazy. Don't try and explain, well, the loan-to-value is really, don't read paragraph for paragraph the agreement of sale when you're going through it. Just say the loan-to-value is what I talked about above. It's a protective figure that we're putting in here. These are the terms that you're willing to accept for the property. And everything they do with the appraised value will hinge upon that. Okay? You good? satisfied, the lender gives the buyer the right to guarantee the interest rate at or below the maximum level stated. Stated where? Above the interest rates, okay? If the lender gives the buyer the right to lock in the interest rate, buyer will do so at least 15 days before settlement. Now this is a date that can be changed, but nobody does. Anything that has an underline under it, any number that's in here, except for around the homeowners association and clauses can be changed. Buyer must lock in. This is a date, and there's nothing wrong with you when you do an agreement of sale with the buyer's copy that they're going to have for you to highlight it. Nothing wrong with doing that, to point out. If they get the option to lock in and they don't do it, they're at risk of losing their money. They're at risk of being in default if they no longer can qualify because they didn't do what they said. Remember, Mr. Buyer, I said that time is of the essence, meaning everything has to happen when we say it's going to happen in the agreement. If it doesn't, you are at risk. This is one of those risky dates. You must lock in no later. If the lender gives you the right to lock in, you must do so at least 15 days before settlement. Buyer gives the seller as seller's sole option and as permitted by law to contribute financially without promise of reimbursement, meaning the buyer wouldn't have to pay back the seller, to the buyer and or the mortgage lender to make the terms available. What does that mean? The buyer's given permission for what? The seller to pay down their interest rate in order to make the deal happen. Without the seller, so what this is saying is the interest rates go up. The buyer says, oh, I can't afford the house anymore. The seller can pay a point or two, if they want to get them the rate. So you can't use this as an out. You can't necessarily use the interest rate number that you have up here, this low and high. Don't depend on that. Say, oh, well, the rates went up too high, now you can get out. Be careful, because people forget that this language is down here. How many of you didn't realize this was here? Honestly. Okay? Okay, it's all right. The seller says, oh, you're going to stay in the deal. I'll buy your rate down. And then the buyer may be happy with that. And that's okay. But don't try to use it for the buyer to get out because they found another house that they like better. Think that you can get out. As a seller agent, be aware that the seller has a right to do that and that it's in there. Okay? Yes?
Kathy, now, from the seller's perspective, going back to the maximum interest rate, I wouldn't want a small window there, because I wouldn't want an easy out. Buyer, especially I'm looking at multiple offers, if I just have one, could I counter and ask for, or should I just?
Absolutely, you can counter any term in the agreement, but I would explain as a seller's agent, say, usually, a good buyer's agent is going to put a percentage in here that they know that the buyer is not going to qualify. So even if we countered back with a higher number, chances are, you look at the buyer, look how much they make, say, this buyer probably can't afford too much more than that. That's why we have a tight window.
Because I have other buyers that, but I don't want more than that. And I said, but it's going to change. It could change in a week.
Yeah, you have to put some. You have to put something in there. But be careful whatever it is. Make sure they can qualify for it. Okay? And when you're on the seller side, you just explain, say they probably don't qualify for too much more. That's why it's tight. It's close in there. Okay? Be aware of that. Okay. I don't know what letter it is on yours because I'm using the revised one. I'm not using yours. But which letter are we on that talks about one of the other most important things here? Within blank days from the execution. Okay, so you're on C and we're on E. Within blank days, this is a number you're going to want to fill in something differently than 7 days. Why? Why would you want to fill in something more than 7 days? Let's read what it says. Within blank days, 7 days if not specified, what's the buyer have to do? From the execution date, remember everything, Mr. Buyer, hinges upon the execution date. So within however many days we're going to say, you must. It doesn't say may, it says will, okay? So you explain to a buyer, will means must, okay? You will make a completed, written mortgage application. That's not a pre-approval over the phone, that's signing your name, including payment for the appraisal. Now, a lot of people don't want to pay for the appraisal. Why? Until they have what done? The home inspections, right? So this is a date that you're going to want to push out, yes? Hinging upon, say, we're going to pick a date here so that you don't have to. We're giving them a pre-approval. But if you don't make written mortgage application and pay for the appraisal, you could be considered in default of the agreement, and again, your money is at risk. So we're going to put a date in here that is longer. Keeping in mind now that whatever date you put in there, you have to give time for the processing of the loan, for the underwriting of the loan, the mortgage commitment, and settlement. So you have to do a lot of planning when you're getting ready to write an offer in your head, so you can explain the options to the buyer. So if you're going to do a 30-day settlement, okay, you can't put a 15-day written mortgage application on here. Are you with me? You can't wait 15 days to do a written mortgage application because no one is going to process a loan in 15 days. And whatever date you put in here, be very careful that the buyer adheres to that date. Okay? Or they're at risk to say, well, why isn't the loan able to be done? The first thing they're going to look at, well, when did the buyer make mortgage application? We've had more deals with more problems with this. Well, they didn't make their application until 3 weeks because they wanted to be sure that the home inspection, and we were waiting for an estimate from the roofer, and then we didn't have it, and then the basement flooded, and then we didn't know what to do, and now you still think you're going to want to make even a 45-day settlement? Your dates that you put in can't just be, on a whim. Oh, we're going to put 15 days for this and 10 days for this. It all has to work together.
Question.
Okay? Yes.
Question, when you normally do the agreement, say you do 15 days for the inspection,
Yes?
would you put, say, 20 days on this to give us the time to,
Depends on your what? Your settlement date. Depends on your, everything's going to
Very
depend on
rarely.
your settlement date. How soon do they want to move in? Then you're going to have to make everything happen a lot faster.
right, but normally it's, okay, I got
Okay?
you. Yep.
Okay?
Mhm.
Appraisal credit reports without delay. Otherwise, responsible lenders of buyers to broker for buyer is authorized to communicate with the mortgage lender. Okay, fine. The next letter, which your letter then is D. This was added in 2010. Buyer will be in default of this agreement, and is it bold?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Kathy.
Buyer will be in default of this agreement if buyer furnishes false information to anyone concerning buyer's financial status. That means that buyer's financial information sheet, if they didn't put something on there, fails to cooperate in good faith with the processing of the loan, including delay of the appraisal. Why is the appraisal delayed? Because they didn't what?
Tell the truth.
Pay their money and make their written mortgage application. So it's very clear here. You will be in default, and Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, what default means is you will lose your deposit money if they can prove that you were in default. And to define default, here's one area of the agreement of sale where I'm going to explain what default is. So if you give incorrect information on your buyer's financial, if you say that you have money and then you go and you spend it, okay, then that is not cooperating with the lender. If the lender asks you for paperwork and you don't give it in, okay, so those words there, fails to cooperate in good faith. They ask you for something, you don't give it in, you can't get the mortgage, you're going to lose your money. Fails to lock in the interest rates as stated in the other paragraph that we talked about, or otherwise causes the lender to reject, refuse, approve, or issue a loan. You will lose your money. So when you're going over these paragraphs, say, now there's a couple places where you could lose money, your money could be at risk, and here's one of them here. So it's my job, again, convey your value. So it's my job to remind you of the time frames and be sure that you stay on track. How are you going to do this? How are you as the agent going to make sure that you have all these time frames? What do you use? Who's been around? Paul, what do you use for your dates? Yeah, but how do you keep track of it as an agent?
I put it in my calendar.
In your calendar book. So you must put these dates. The minute you have a totally executed agreement of sale, you take it, you get all the dates, and you put it in your calendar, and with a reminder to remind you at least 2 to 3 days before. If you put it in a phone, I recommend using a Google Calendar. You can have it alert your phone 2 to 3 days before. It can send you an email. Google Calendar can send you a text, an email, and ding your phone. You can set up 3 alerts with a Google Calendar so that you don't ever miss anything. So you may want to say, okay, 4 days before I'm going to remember that the mortgage commitment is due, and okay, send me an email the next day in case I forgot and I was busy in the middle of a settlement, and then send me a text message the day before. Like, you can do that with the Google Calendar. So whatever you have to do, that's time management, is to have somebody or something else remind you of when everything's due. Your buyer will be in jeopardy. More agents fail at this than probably any other thing in keeping an agreement of sale together, not following up with the time frames. Okay, so you get the mortgage commitment. The buyer gets the mortgage commitment. What are they supposed to do? Right away, they're supposed to deliver it to who? The seller. Agents forget to do that. Mortgage commitment's due, they never gave it in. Now you get the commitment. This is the only place in the agreement of sale where a seller has a right to terminate the agreement. There's no other place in the agreement of sale. The buyer has all the options to terminate. If they don't like this, if they don't like this, if they can't work this out, buyer terminates. The only place that a seller can terminate an agreement of sale is in the mortgage commitment. And where is it? If the seller does not receive a copy of the mortgage commitment by the mortgage commitment date, seller may terminate this agreement of sale by giving written notice to a buyer. Huge, huge, huge. So what you want to say to the buyer is, it's so important that you comply with doing everything you have to do with the lender. And when they say they want a copy of your bank statement, you can't give them page 3 of the bank statement. You have to give them the whole thing. That's one thing that buyers don't realize. You must give the whole statement. You cannot print up that page that shows your balance off of your online computer, because that's not a bank statement with your account number. There's no proof that it's yours. They want the real, full bank statements. You have all this conversation when you meet with them for the first time as a buyer and say, I want you to get together your last 2 months' bank statements, your most recent pay stubs, your last 2 years' tax returns, even though they may only want 1. Get all this stuff together, because this is all going to be needed, because time is going to be of the essence, and I don't want you to lose your money. And worst case is, if the seller decides not to sell his house for whatever reason, he's going to be watching the mortgage commitment date. Because if you don't have it in that agent's hand, giving it to the seller or giving it to the seller's agent, confirming that they got it, okay? If they don't have it, they can just terminate the whole deal. This is the only time in the agreement of sale where a seller can terminate is in the mortgage contingency addendum. The second place where they can terminate in the mortgage contingency is seller may terminate this agreement if the commitment contains, first of all, if it does not satisfy the terms of paragraph 8, which means if it's not a loan in the proper terms that you asked for, seller can terminate, not buyer, seller can terminate. And if it contains any condition that was not specified in the agreement of sale. So, if you didn't put in the agreement of sale that the buyer has to sell their house, and now the condition, it appears in the commitment that they have to sell their house, and you cannot remove that condition within 7 days, okay, which is a number that can be changed here, 7 days, the seller can terminate the agreement of sale. If you have a buyer's financial statement, there's a question on there that says, is any part of the purchase price coming from anywhere other than shown? There's this little question. And you say yes. I always recommend that if it's the sale of a house, you say sale of house. You don't have to use contingent upon addendum. A lot of people think that muddies up the agreement of sale when you use it's contingent upon the sale of the house. If you put it on the buyer's financial statement and say sale of house, that's disclosure to the seller right there. So if a condition comes in on the commitment and says you must sell your house, say, oh yeah, we already told you we're gonna sell our house. But it wasn't contingent upon the sale of their house, technically, with an addendum, but technically it was, because you said on the buyer's financial, this is where we're getting the money. And a good agent is gonna look at it and say, well, they need 100,000 and I'm only showing they have 25, where's it coming from? Oh, sale of house. Mr. Seller, they do have to sell their house. The agent does their job, they know you have to sell your house. Okay, so you're creating your own little contingency using a buyer's financial statement. How'd you get along this long,
I don't know.
how did you do it so many years without,
No.
without all this craziness? I know that the new people are like scared, like, oh my God,
Yeah.
oh my God, how am I gonna play all this? This is amazing.
I've been in it 13
Continue.
years.
Here's what I wanna tell, we're gonna take a break. Okay, here's what I wanna tell you. This consumer guide to the agreement of sale is the most excellent tool to understand the agreement because it is in plain language. There is one that they have that's for agents, that you can study the technical side. For you to learn it, I recommend that you read this 3 times. It's plain language, so that you can explain it better. Explains it not in a scary way. Okay, I'm scaring you a little bit, I know. But that's because I don't want you to get in trouble, and I want you to protect your client.